Synthetic rutile is a lab-created material composed of titanium dioxide. It has the highest dispersion of any transparent gem material. Its refractive index lies in the 2.85 range, which means that light entering an object of this material will reflect several times before leaving it. Recrystallized rutile has been grown for some high-end optical applications like high-powered prisms and as a substrate on which to grow other crystal structures. Its unique qualities also make it an ideal candidate material to cut into a gemstone. In this video, I share a gemstone cut design I created for a piece of synthetic rutile. This is not a comprehensive tutorial for GemCut Studio, instead a brief walkthrough of my design. I'm sharing this process to make it available for others to recreate or modify using GemCut Studio. The rough material I'm beginning with is a section cut from a boule which looks like a thick half moon. One flat side forms a rectangle whose length and width are already close to a ratio of 1 to 1.2, so I will incorporate that size ratio into the design. First, for our pavilion, we will set G1 to 90 degrees using two-fold symmetry and 0 mirrors. And we will begin to cut. Likewise, G2 should become 90 degrees using two-fold symmetry and cut. We'll use the Edit button to scale our XY ratio. I'm going to use 1.22 for this project. This will give us a length to width ratio of 1.22. Set our cutting angle to 54 degrees using two-fold symmetry, 0 mirrors. We're going to cut indexes 24 and 72. I'm not concerned with cutting to form a temporary culet, as the next few steps will do so. I'm going to place 3 step cuts into the 24, 72 indexes. Using the cut tool, I'm going to set our angle to 42 degrees and cut in to add a meet point, selecting about 1/4 of the way from our girdle. I bring this in closer until I can see where my cutting angle is going to come in. Choose the side that's closest to C, and then we'll add a meet point along this edge, about 1/4 from the top. Our next step, we'll cut an angle at 33 degrees, and we'll add a meet point at about 1/3 of the length that's left. Since we're dividing this total length into 4, the space that's left will be divided into 3. Then 26 degrees will divide our remaining space. We now have our length to width ratio set. We have formed pavilion facets that form a culet in the shape of a keel. Our 96 and 48 indexes are still at 90 degrees, and we want to bring those sides in. I'm going to select 61 degrees for an angle on indexes 96 and 48 using twofold symmetry. And I'm going to cut them in to a depth that will meet our P1 and G1, G2 at this corner intersection. Using a shallow angle of 61 degrees allows us to keep some of the culet in a keel shape to later interact with crown cuts that will be perpendicular, creating a modified opposed bar or pixelation look. We have also now set our girdle meet points. Set twofold symmetry and mirrors to 2. Set our cutting angle to 45 degrees, and we will create a new cut, splitting our 96 indices and our 48 indices into 2 cuts. We can meet this and cut. I want just a little more opportunity to play with light in the pavilion, so I'm going to create some small facets along the corner edges. Set the angle to 42 degrees, twofold symmetry, 0 mirrors, and at index 14 and 62, we will cut in to create meet points in the corners. To account for our length to width ratio not being a square, we'll have to offset our other corners by a half degree, setting our angle to 42.5, our symmetry at twofold, no mirrors. We will cut into index 37 and 85, meeting at the corners. Select the crown to create and edit facets on the crown. We're going to set a 32-degree angle for our facets to come in on indices 72 and 24 using two-fold symmetry. This cut will determine the thickness of our girdle. But we don't have to be specific now because we will resize that later. Setting an angle of 18 degrees on indexes 96 and 48 using two-fold symmetry, we will cut to connect a meet point connecting C1 with G1 and G2. Now we show girdle facets the whole way around. Now I'm going to cut steps into the C2 facet. Set an angle of 14 on indices 96 and 48 using two-fold symmetry. And we are going to place a meet point at about 3/4 along this edge. Select 10 degrees on indices 96 and 48, two-fold symmetry. And we're going to place a meet point dividing this remaining space into 2/3 or into thirds. For our table, we have a 0-degree cut that you can either decide to cut by eye or a meet point dividing the remaining space in half. For this design, we were not too specific in entering our angles, but we did start at 50, drop down by about 8 or 10, and from 50s to 40s to 30s to 20s. The material we're using is Rutile. It's yellow. So now we can use some of the other features available in GemCut Studio to test its performance and see what it might look like. I have modified this design just a little bit up in the manual optimizer, and I have resulted in these specific angles: 54-23, 42-24, 33-60, and so on. And as you can see, all of these angles are specific